Good morning, class. We are now on the continuation of our studies on the half of the Bible, the second chapter of Acts. But before we go in, I'd like to thank you all for all the stuff that you are helping us with the food that those marvelous food that you all feed us while we are in the prison of health. And also, the most important thing is remembering us in your prayers. My wife, Gertrude, she's improving. This week, she went and saw her doctor, and her doctor says that the bone, after taking the x-rays, he told her that the broken place is in alignment of the original area. So it will just take time to heal. So, please continue to remember her in your prayers. Thank you very much. And now we are on the second chapter where Peter was addressing on the day of Pentecost. Last week we were on the first part of Peter's sermon, where we were on verse 16 to 21. So I try to, show that the spirit that was, poured forth, in the days, in the last days, upon the sons and daughters and handmaids, we can see that how the Holy Spirit fell on those people, in the days, of, where there was no New Testament Bible yet. So they need those miracles to confirm that what they were speaking and what they were doing were of God's approved items. So here we can see that there were only two ways how people received the following of the Holy Spirit, which was poured, like Joel says. Peter says this is that. So, there is no doubt that we can see that this was what Joel was saying, that shall be in the last days. So we see that the Holy Spirit was falling on them, upon all those. So like I said, there were only two ways how people received in those days those falling of the Holy Spirit. One is, the baptismal measure, which is, which was on the apostles and apostles only. That we have seen that. And the second, way how people receive is by laying on of the apostles' hands. So those were the only two ways that people received. So here we see that the Holy Spirit baptismal was for the apostles and apostles only. And the rest, we can see that it was by the laying on of the apostles' hand. And that was to be in the last days. So we were on that last week, and if we continue on down to verse 19 and 20, we see that God said he will show wonders in heaven above and signs on the earth, signs beneath. So that means, the wonders that were, what God was going to show was with the, miracles, the thing. And verse 20 says, the sun shall turn into darkness and the moon into blood before the day of the Lord come. So we were trying to, pinpointing what the day of the Lord there means. If we continue to read, it says that great and notable day. Now with this phrase, great and notable day, many people, they, many of our, Christians, those who call themselves Christians, they say that it is the last day when Jesus is coming back with the final judgment. It doesn't say that. Here, that great and notable day is associated with verse 19 and 20, where there's wonders in heaven and signs on earth. So we can plainly say that these miracles, associated, day of the Lord is not the final day, because Jesus is coming back for sure. But there won't be any signs and wonders of his coming. Even Jesus says he does not know. So there won't be any, signs and wonders. His coming was to be, as a thief in the night, when nobody expects. But the signs and wonders are things that we can expect, that this thing is going to be near. So here the great and notable day, continuing in verse 21 says, and it shall be that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Now, here the word saved, we got to dig in here to understand, because, the salvation here, what it's talking about, I would like to take you on to the, the final days of Jesus, when he was, talking to his, 4 disciples, about the destruction of Jerusalem, the temple, the stones, those stones will not be left one stone upon the other. That Jesus was telling. So I'm taking you into the Olivet Discourse for a moment, and we'll take a little time on that, because I think it is very, very important. Now, Jesus, in his last days, before, he was taken up to the cross, he made that entry into Jerusalem. We all can understand that as a triumph, entry. We can remember that he went in with the, riding a little ass, and those people, they were, receiving him with loud shouts like Hosanna, and, with palm leaves and all. So that entrance, he went into Jerusalem, and, when he comes to the, let me, excuse me. In Matthew 21, we can see that Jesus was, entering into Jerusalem, and then, the triumph entry, and then, he cleared the temple who were making merchandise, basing on that, like, money changing and all these. So he was cleaning the temple, and then in the evening he went back to Bethany, for a night's sleep, and then the next day he came back and saw the fig tree, and then since there were no fruits on the fig tree, he cursed the fig tree, and it turned, it withered away in a moment. And then, if we continue to read there, we can read about the 2 sons. One says he's not going, but he went in the final. The other one says he's going, but he didn't go. And the continuing the household, the vineyard, that's a beautiful, parable that Jesus taught there. The vineyard was hired to, the Jews, if I have to say it. And, at the time of fruit, he sent, people there to take the, distinct fruits for, for enjoyment, but they kill all those that were sent. Finally, 2 times he sent, and finally he sent his son, but they killed him outside the city. So, with that, at the ending part, we can see that the Jews, the Pharisees, they understood chapter 21, verse 45 and 46 says, "And when the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parable, they perceived that he spake of them. And when they sought to lay hold on him, they feared the multitudes, because they took him for a prophet." So here Jesus escaped there, from the hands of the Jews, the Pharisees, the ruler of the Jews community. So, in chapter 22, we read about the marriage feast, and then the Caesar, the coin. Jesus told them that, return what is Caesar's unto Caesar, and that's the thing. And then if we go on to the lawyer's question upon which is the greatest commandment, and then when we got to chapter 23, I like to emphasize that very much. We see that Jews are totally against Jesus in these time, and then when we reach chapter 23, we read about the 7 woes that Jesus threw into the Jewish elders. So here on the last verse, in the last woe, I like you to understand that Jesus was talking about the Jews' condition. He said, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye build the sepulchres of the prophets and garnish the tombs of the righteous, and say, if we have been in the days of our fathers, we should not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets." So here they were admitting that they were the people who was against Jesus, against the Lord. And he continued in verse 34 saying, "Therefore, behold, I send you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them shall ye kill and crucify, and some of them shall ye scourge in your synagogues, and persecute from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of Abel and the righteous unto the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom ye slew between the sanctuary and the altar." Verse 36 plainly says, "Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation." So here we see that the wrath of God upon denying Jesus, and not just denying Jesus, they put Jesus onto the cross. So the wrath of God was to come upon the Jews in the time of those days. It says, "All these things shall come upon this generation, the blood of the righteous." So last week I was talking to you about the days of vengeance, where Luke chapter 21 verse 23 says, and in verse 22. In verse 23 it says that the wrath of God is upon the children of Israel. Here, in this thing 23, when after that Jesus, he looked at Jerusalem and he cried, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, that killeth the prophets and stoned them that are sent unto her. How often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathered her chickens under her wings, and you would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate." Here Jesus was, showing his 4 disciples that Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. This is the vengeance of God. This is the wrath of God that was fallen upon the city of Jerusalem, which is upon the Jews. Here, if we read on to chapter 24, he showed his disciples the temple, and he says, "There shall not be left here one stone upon another, that shall not be thrown down. So it's very plain that the destruction of Jerusalem, Jesus was indicating. And then, if we read on down, I'm not going to, into all the detail because this is a beautiful part, and I would like you to read on your own, see all the signs and wonders that proceeded before, the day of the great and notable day. Now here in verse 15 of 24, chapter 24, it says, Wherefore, when therefore you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, then let them that are in Judea flee into the mountains. So here is the first part in Matthew's Achard. It says, when you see the Daniel's prophecy saying that abomination of desolation, he said, flee into the mountains. So this is in the account of Matthew. Now let me go into the account of Mark. Here too, concerning this, Jesus said, But when you see abomination of desolation standing where he ought not, let him that readeth understand. Then let them that are in Judea flee into the mountains. So here too, what we see is, if they see what Daniel had prophesied, they have to flee. Jesus told them to flee. Now, last week we were on the, Luke 21, Luke chapter 21, the same, discourse, Mount Olivet discourse. Here we see, but when ye see, now here I want to tell you that, Matthew was written to the Jewish audience, especially, and, so it was taken from the Daniel saying, the desolation, abomination of desolation. So, but in Luke, it was addressing to the general audience. So it's very plain where it says that abomination of desolation. Here it says, for that word, Luke used this kind of explanation. But when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that her desolation is at hand. Then let them not in Judea flee into the mountains, and let them that are in the midst of her depart out, and let them not that are in country enter therein. So here, in all the three, Olivet discourse, we can read that when they see this thing, at hand, when they see these things happen, they got to flee into the mountains. This was what the Christians did. This was what the children of God did. But the Jews, they were so stubborn, they didn't go, they didn't believe Jesus, they didn't call upon him, so they just defend the armies of Rome, and then they have to back in defense, and finally they got into the city of Jerusalem, and the Roman armies took 3.5 years to stamp down Jerusalem, and they destroyed the whole city, including the temple. So this is the Olivet discourse. It says they got to run. Christians are told to depart. They ran into the mountains. Here I was telling you about the book of Revelation, which is the discourse, Olivet discourse by John. Like I said, we can read that Olivet discourse in the book of Matthew. We can see that in the book of Mark, it is recorded, and in the book of Luke, it is recorded. But we can't see in the Gospel of John, not a single bit. But we can read it. John is showing us in the book of Revelation. So the book of Revelation is the Olivet Discourse. Now, if we go to the Revelation, to chapter, chapter 12, where we see that, John saw a woman, she was clothed with the sun, and she was standing on the moon, and she had 12 stars, on her head as a crown. So this woman was going to deliver a son, and this son was going to rule the people with the iron rod. And, the serpent, the dragon, was awaiting to destroy him. And then finally, when the son came, and he went up into heaven, the dragon couldn't, catch him there. So, he finally met with Michael and his host, and he was dropped back to, earth. And let me read that out, just for you to connect with the destruction of Jerusalem. In chapter 12 of Revelation, verse 5 and 6, and she was delivered of a son, a man-child, who is to rule the nations with a rod of iron, and a child was caught up unto God and unto his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that there they may nourish her 1,223 threescore days. So here, we read that 1,203 days is equivalent to 3.5 years. So this is the time when Romans, they surrounded the city and they stepped down. So here we see that the woman, the church, the believers, they fled, into the mountains where, to the place prepared of God, and there they may nourish her 1,203 days. Now, if we skip down to verse 13 and 14, and when the dragon saw that he was cast down to the earth, he persecuted the woman and brought forth the man-child. And there was given to the woman the 2 wings of the great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness unto her place, where she is nourished for a time and half a time. So here again, 3.5 years, she was, in the staying in the mountains, in the place where God has prepared. So this is the Olivet Discourse. When Jews, they persecuted the Christians, they have to flee. So, when the Romans, they destroyed the city of Jerusalem, Christians were no more in the city. They flee from the, occasion, and they were saved. Now, this is what the 2nd chapter of Acts is saying, in that great and notable day. Now, let me come back to that. So, like I said, wonders and signs accompanied, the sun darkened and the moon turned to blood before that great and notable day. And it shall be that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. So this salvation is not a spiritual salvation here. This salvation is the physical salvation when they depend on the Lord, when they, obeyed what Christ has told them to flee into the mountains. So they fled and they were saved. This is what it is talking about, So here, when they call on the name of the Lord, they were saved. When was that? The great and notable day, which was accompanied by the miracles and signs. So that shows that this is the destruction of Jerusalem. And moreover, I like to, confirm it from what Peter has taken from Joel chapter 2, verse 28 and onward. Joel chapter 2, verse 28 and onward. And it says, let me read out so you can see that it is the same thing that Peter was taking it from here. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see vision, and also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days, the last days. In those days will I pour out my spirit, and I will show wonders in heavens and in earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon unto blood. The moon unto blood before the great and terrible day of Jehovah cometh. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of Jehovah shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be those that escape. And Jehovah had said, and among the remnant those whom Jehovah doeth call. So here in verse 32 we can notice that, and it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of Jehovah shall be delivered. The word there is used, delivered. And then, for in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be those that escaped. So, do you think that if it's for the spiritual, salvation, will those words be used like escape and delivered? So, we can plainly see that Peter is taken from here, and he's mentioning in Acts 2, saying that, that great and notable day, and it shall be that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. That salvation is not a spiritual salvation. It is the spiritual salvation when they saw that the abomination of desolation, which Luke terms as the army surrounding the city of Jerusalem, they had to flee. So they fled and they escaped. They escaped the death where Romans, when they slaughtered the city of Jerusalem. So that is the day of vengeance. That is the day when God, the sting wrath, fell upon those people, Jews. So here we see that, last week I didn't have a chance to go into it. So here what we can understand is, the what's called the Olivet Discourse, in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Revelation. We can see plainly that, Christians, the woman whom was disturbed and attacked by the dragon, she fled into a place where God has prepared, and she was fed for 1,260 days, 3.5 years, time, half a time, times time and half a time. And in Luke it says, 42 months. So, it all comes to 3.5 years where the, Jerusalem was destroyed. Here, we can plainly see that, the great and notable day doesn't refer to the final, distinct judgment when Jesus is coming back. It shows that it is the end of the Jewish age. Now, if we continue to the second section, I like to go into it. It says, verse 22 and 23 and 24, that is on the second section. Here, Ye men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God, unto you by mighty works and wonders and signs which God did by him in the midst of you, even as ye yourself know. You yourself know him, being delivered up by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God, ye by the hand of lawless men did crucify and slay, whom God raised up, having loosed the pangs of death, because it was not possible that he should be holding of it. So this verse is telling us that the Jews are the people, whom Christ was being crucified. Jews did that. Now, if we read the final stages of, account in the book of John, we see that the Jews, they even said, let the, blood, come upon us. And also, in the 19th chapter, the Jews says, what they told Pilate is, Pilate, if you release Jesus, you are not a friend of Caesar. So they are trying to, tighten up the screws, to Pilate. And then the high priest says, beside Caesar, there is no king for them. So, here we can clearly see that the Jews were the people who put Jesus onto the cross. They crucified him. Now, there were lots of passages that says, for instance, like now in the same chapter of verse 36, it says, let all the house of Israel therefore know assuredly that God had made him both Lord and Christ, this Jesus whom ye crucified. So the audience in that time were the Jews. There were no Gentiles there. And also, if we, in verse 23, the verse we just read, this thing we are on it. In verse 23 says, him being delivered up by the determined counsel and foreknowledge of God, ye by the hand of lawless men crucify and, slay. So Jews were the people who slayed Jesus, not the Romans. The Romans are just told what what they have to do. So they were just following the orders. It was the Jews that crucified Jesus. So, here the Son was taken out of the city and he was crucified, according to that parable, in the chapter 22. Now, we can read that, the Jews were the cause of, but we can see that there were some, of the Jews that still have that faith in God, and they were still, staying loyal to God. But they were very, very few. And out of that few, the Lord had brought the Messiah into the world. We can read about, in the book, we can see that, from Mary, Joseph, their cousin, Mary's cousin, Elizabeth, Zechariah, and, the prophet lady who's called Anna and Simeon. So these people are what the Bible recorded as a true, very few Jews that were left. So through them, Jesus was brought into the Messiah was brought into the world. But Satan, he still tries to destroy him, but, he couldn't. And finally, when he was dropped back to earth after pursuing the son that was going to rule the nations with rod of iron, he pursued after the woman. So the woman had to flee into the wilderness where God had prepared a place for her and where she was going to be fed. So this is the, what you call Olivet Discourse that Jesus was, indicating that it was soon to be happen. So here, all these things, let me go back to Matthew to show you that those things when it was going to be happen. If we read on down, in verse 32, 33, and 34, here it says, "Now from the fig tree learn her parable when her branch is now become tender, and putteth forth its leaves. Ye know that the summer is nigh. Even so ye also, when ye see all these things, know ye that he is nigh, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away till all these things be accomplished." So here is what is saying, that these things which was mentioned was to come in the days of those people, the first century people. So, the book of Revelation, John's Olivet Discourse, if we just read on, start reading from the very beginning, we see what we can notice is things that must shortly come to pass and things that are near to be happen, so that the seven churches could understand when they read and they could, obey it and keep it. Because it says those who keep it are blessed people, So here we see that, book of Revelation is the Olivet Discourse. So the book of Revelation is not about the second coming. Many, those who call Christians themselves, they believe that the book of Revelation is something, that is going to happen in the later days. No. The book of Revelation is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, things that must shortly come to pass, and it happened. The events in the book of Revelation happened already, in the first century. And it's, when we read about, coming of Jesus there, we can understand that it was the coming in the days of, those Jews where God judged them. It is not a future thing, So if we would like to, learn about the second coming, don't go to book of Revelation. It is not about the second coming. If you want to know about the second coming and all, you have to go to books like Thessalonians, Peter's, and even in Matthew 25 it says when Jesus comes again, he's going to gather all the people from earth, and then he's going to divide sheep and goat. So if we would like to read about the second coming, we cannot go to the book of Revelation. Book of Revelation is not about the second coming. Book of Revelation is about the destruction of Jerusalem, the Olivet Discourse, presented by John. So I think I'm going to stop here for this week, and if there's any questions or comments. Yes.
You got the devil and his angels being thrown into the lake of fire. Are you saying that that's already happened and not in the future?
Oh yes. Now the lake of fire with brimstones and all. If we study about those, we can from the very beginning, when there's brimstones and all fell upon Sodom and Gomorrah. So what that means is the end of the evil things there, right? The end of the evil things. So here, brimstone and fire, the lake of fire, is somewhat showing that, the enemies could not attack Christians anymore. It's the end of the evil thing for Christianity. Because, if we, like I try to teach is, the dragon, he was after Christ, and he couldn't, this thing stopped him, and finally Christ overcame him, at the cross. So he, in those days, I'm trying to teach that, the strong man is bound, and then, Christians are taken out from his house. Jesus says when he is lifted up, he's going to draw men unto him. This is where Jesus bound Satan. That we read in the book of Revelation in chapter 20, when he bind Satan 1,000 years. The reason is not to deceive the nations. And then, at the end, he's going to be released for a few things. So Satan was bound, at the cross. And then, so he was very limited in his scope. So he had to use agents. The very first agent that he used is the Jews. So I'm talking about the Jews who were against Jesus. So the Jews were the first, agents of the dragon. And the second agent of the dragon is the beast that come out of the water, which is the Roman Empire. Because in those days, Roman Empire is the whole sole, authority, in the physical world. So Satan used that as a second, So when the Jews were, the Romans came later, not at the same time.
And you're suggesting that the release of the devil for a period of time is what we're living in now?
No, it was then when he was released in the 7th, verse of chapter 20. It says when Satan was released, he went and deceived many people, Gog and Magog, and then they went against the camp of the saints, and the fire came down and devoured them, and all of them were, cast into this lake of fire. In another word, the lake of fire is the ending of, plots against the Christians, the, evil, thoughts and deeds against the Christian. So, it was ended. Now let me tell you about the, brimstone and all. Do you think there will be any brimstones in hell? So, we are no more in a physical world, right? All the, creations and all will be ended up, in the second, Peter chapter 3, it's going to melt up and all. So when we go over there, there won't be any physical things anymore. So sulfur is mentioned, like brimstones and all, just for us to understand that the fire is very hard to, take out, because it keeps burning and burning and burning. So that's, like book of Revelation is, full of symbolic terms. We got to be a little careful about that.
Very good.
Yeah.